Bearings are mounted in one of the following three methods: press, heat expansion, and adapter or withdrawal sleeve. First, let us take a look at the most common method, the press method. When the mounting provides interference with the shaft, use a mounting jig that corresponds to the size of the inner ring. Pressure fit the bearing with a press or jack. It is recommended that a thin film of oil be applied to the shaft. When a press or jack is not available, hammer in the bearings with a plastic or rubber hammer only to minimize shock to the bearings. When using the press method, make sure the bearing is centered correctly. Needless to say, the bearing should not be hammered directly. Pressure should be applied only to the inner ring. Now we move on to the heat expansion method. If the interference between the inner ring and the shaft is large, the heat expansion method is recommended. This method of mounting is simple if a heat tank is available. Place the bearing on the screen, which is several inches off the bottom, and heat the tank to the required temperature. Normally, good quality machine oil or transmission oil is used. The following 2 points should be checked. First, the oil to be used must always be clean. Second, the oil temperature should not be allowed to exceed 120 degrees centigrade or 248 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature rises above 120 degrees centigrade, the bearing hardness is reduced. The bearing should be mounted immediately after heating. If the bearing does not slip on smoothly, do not force it. In this case, remove the bearing and reheat it. If expanding the bearing by heating is not sufficient to get it on the shaft, you may also cool the shaft in dry ice to make it contract. Contraction will also occur in the axial direction as it is cooled, and there is a possibility of some clearance developing between the inner ring and shoulder. To prevent this from happening, a small amount of pressure can be applied to the mounting dolly. Finally, the adapter or withdrawal sleeve method. We shall now describe the mounting of the tapered bore bearing using the sleeve method. In this method, a sleeve is inserted between the inner ring and shaft to create interference. If the sleeve is tightened excessively, the residual clearance becomes too small. Therefore, sufficient care must be exercised in tightening the sleeve. First, measure the clearance between the rollers and the outer ring using a feeler gauge. Next, select the feeler gauge that matches the residual clearance. The residual clearance is the difference between the clearance before mounting and the specified clearance reduction. Tighten the sleeve up to the point which the feeler gauge can be inserted with slight pressure.